In this video, I'm going to show you how to place the rear brake hose on this Honda Civic. Located in the rear wheel well, and we do have to remove the wheel for this and bleed the brakes at the end, so let's get started. Use a 19mm socket to remove all 5 lug nuts and then remove the wheel. Now with the wheel off, you can see the brake hose goes from the brake line all the way down to the wheel. I sprayed both ends with rust penetrant, so that's why it looks like it's wet. I will pinch the brake hose at this point with some special pliers. If you don't have those, you can either put some locking pliers on here or just work quickly, or you could put a pry bar up against the brake pedal and push it up against the seat. As soon as the plunger in the master cylinder goes all the way in, it will stop the brake fluid from flowing. I prefer to just pinch the brake hose just because it's easier and it's right here. Now I will not be pinching the new brake hose. I'm doing this now so I can do it on the old brake hose. I have these pliers that are meant for this purpose. And like I said, if you don't have these, you can use some regular locking pliers and just pinch it shut. And I'm going to start at the wheel side on the old brake hose so that I can put the new one on here and then quickly swap over this end to lose the least amount of brake fluid. On the back side of the knuckle, you'll see where the brake hose meets the brake line going into the wheel cylinder. Use a 10mm flare nut wrench, looks like this, and grabs onto a couple extra sides over an open-ended wrench, especially when the fittings are rusty. This comes in handy. And try to break this free. Like I said, I already sprayed it with rust penetrant, and hopefully this breaks free and doesn't take the line with it. What usually happens is the line will rust to the fitting, and when you spin this, instead of it breaking free like this, that's great, it just broke free, it'll actually start spinning the line as well. When that happens, if you twist it too many times, metal's metal and metal breaks, so you want to avoid that by trying to break it free, working it back and forth with rust penetrant and unthreading it all the way after the line stops spinning with the fitting. Now, if this fitting is refusing to break free off the line, what you can do is try the other end of the hose, and then if that one breaks free, you can actually twist the hose off of the fitting instead of the fitting off of the hose. Mine's good to go, so I'm just going to finish unthreading this. Now there will be some brake fluid leaking just because the line is full, so is the hose and the wheel cylinder and everything. So you want to have a collection bucket ready to catch all that fluid. Even though it's not going to continue dripping, you don't want the little amount that will come out to get all over the ground. Move that line aside. Now I'm going to use a little pry bar, try to pry out on the locking clip that holds the brake hose on this bracket. Take that off, and if needed, give it a tap with a hammer to get it out of here. Pull it through. Like I said at the beginning, I will be installing the new brake hose as I remove the old one. This new one has a flat cutout right here that has to line up with the bracket just like so, otherwise it will not go in. There we go. That is fully seated. I'm going to take that locking clip now and lock the new hose in. Tap it with a hammer if needed. And now take this line, put it right into the brake hose, the new one, and start threading it on. Now you want to make sure that it is not cross-threading, and with these fittings it's difficult to get them started sometimes just because if they're not perfectly aligned with the threads, they will not start on and you're just spinning it around in circles with no results. So if you think that's the case, try to move it around, push it with your other hand and try to get it to line up. Also, if all of a sudden it gets really tight, but it hasn't bottomed out yet, most likely it's cross-threading, so back it off and try again. Oh, looks like for me that just caught onto the threads, so that's great. I'm going to keep going. Oh, that's bottomed out right there. So I'm going to take my wrench, put it back on, and just give it a little bit extra. That feels good right there. Nice and snug. I'm going to use brake parts cleaner to clean off this area. The reason for that is if there is a leak for some reason, I will see it being wet, but if it's already wet, I will not know that. On the other end of this brake hose, you'll see that it's held on with a bracket. Now the bracket comes with the hose, so all we have to do is remove the line. This line, the fitting on it is completely rounded off and there's nothing left to grab with a wrench, so I'm just going to use locking pliers, which is doable, and that's the only way you're gonna get this off if it's the same for you. Now lock them on nice and tight and pull on this, work it back and forth, and there we have it. That broke free, so it looks like all of my rust here is just on the outside, not on the inside, because that broke free a lot easier than I thought it would. And because I don't have any way to put a wrench on it properly, I'm gonna have to use pliers to finish removing this. Brake fluid will be dripping at this point, so let's work quickly. I'm gonna pull this off. I was hoping to pull it out of the retainer, but looks like the retainer is broken. So I'm just going to leave that there. Use a 12mm socket and remove that bolt. With that bolt out, you'll be able to pull this bracket away. And there's the old brake hose. I'm gonna clean this surface up a little bit. I put a little bit of anti-seize on there to avoid corrosion in the future. Line up the new brake hose. It's got a pin right here that lines up with the body, and then the bolt, of course, that lines up as well. Hold it in position and tighten it up. Make that nice and snug. About 1/8 of a turn after it bottoms out is good if you're doing this by hand. And put the brake line into the brake hose. If yours still had a good cutout, you would use a wrench, but for me, I have to use the pliers and just start it in. All right, that's bottomed out. I'm going to take the larger locking pliers, lock them on again, and give this a quick snug. All right, that's tight. Clean everything up with brake parts cleaner. Now move over to the wheel cylinder, pop off the bleeder screw cap, and with an 8mm open up the bleeder screw. This should allow fluid and air to come out. This is called a gravity bleed. Now the gravity bleed should take care of everything, but if your pedal does not feel right and you think you still have air in the line, do a full manual brake bleed, which you will see how to do at the end of the video. For now, I'm just going to perform my gravity bleed until there are no more air bubbles coming out and I have a steady trickle of fluid. So I'm gonna leave this open for another minute or so and get that fluid running down. It's been about a minute or two, so I'm gonna close this off. I have a nice, clean, steady trickle of fluid coming through. Close it. Before I put the cap back on, I'm going to clean everything with brake parts cleaner to make sure that there's no leak in the future. If it's already wet from bleeding, I will not know that there's a leak. Once everything's cleaned off, don't forget to cap off the bleeder screw. Let's get the wheel back on. Reinstall all 5 lug nuts, bottom them out in a cross pattern, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 79 foot-pounds. Once again, 79 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Double check them. There you have it, job is done. To start the brake bleed, remove the master cylinder cap, which is located on the driver's side of your engine bay. Once you've removed the cap, if you read the text, it'll say at the top right here, .3 brake fluid. That's what this vehicle takes. So you wanna make sure you have plenty on hand. And also, if it is dirty, definitely clean off the area around the cap and on the cap before you take this off. Mine was very clean, so I skipped that. There's also a little screen in here. We're gonna have to remove that as well in order to get the fluid out. I prefer to extract the old fluid before I start. So take this off and set it aside and make sure you put it somewhere where brake fluid won't damage any surface. And at this point, you can use a fluid extractor pump. I'm using a vacuum pump. You can use a turkey baster if that's all you have, and just remove as much of the old fluid out of the reservoir as you can. Stick the hose in there. And I have this reservoir that the fluid will collect in as I pull a vacuum on it. Looks like I got it all out, or as much as I can. You will never get 100% of it out, but the more you do, the fresher the brake fluid will be as it goes through the lines. Now let's fill up the brake fluid reservoir with .3 brake fluid until it reaches the max line. The full line is this right here below the cap where it locks in. We're right about there, so I'm going to cap this off now. That way no debris or moisture gets in here. And now it's time to bleed the brakes. On this particular vehicle, the bleed sequence is to start at the front left caliper, that's the driver's side, bleed that, then move on to the right front, that's the passenger side front, then top off that master cylinder because it will be a little bit low after this, then move to the right rear, the passenger side rear that is, and then the last one will be the left rear and bleed that side, top off the master cylinder after that, and if the pedal does not feel firm or the way you expect it to, bleed again because there's likely more air in the system. But if it feels good, you're good to go. All right, so we're at the front driver's side caliper. I'm gonna remove the bleeder screw boot or cover. And I have this collection receptacle with a hose on it that goes right on the bleeder screw that prevents a lot of spillage. And I'm going to have an assistant in the vehicle ready to pump up the brakes, create some pressure, and then they're going to hold pressure on that brake pedal while I open the bleeder screw to let the fluid out. Go ahead and pump. Okay, open this up. There's a new caliper, so a lot of air. Go ahead and pump again. Okay, pump again. All right, getting better. Go ahead and pump again. All right, go again. I still see a few air bubbles. You want to do this until you have no more air bubbles coming through this hose or out the bleeder screw. All right, that was nice and clean. Let's do it once again. Go ahead and pump. Another clean bleed. One last time just for safety. All right, perfect. You can let go of the brake pedal now. I had several clean bleeds in a row, no air bubbles, no aerated fluid or anything like that. So I'm going to remove my hose and wipe this off. If there was any spillage, go ahead and clean it up with brake parts cleaner. You want to make sure that no brake fluid stays on the caliper, not only so that it doesn't get messy, but also you don't want to confuse it for a potential leak. Cover this back up. Hopefully you still have the cover. This prevents it from getting clogged up. And now you would move to the right front. That's the passenger side front caliper, and do the same exact thing over there. Now that you've bled both front calipers, remove the cap and top off the master cylinder again to make sure it's full for the rear. You want this to stay full. If it pulls air in, you're gonna have to start all over. And if you have ABS, it'll get into the module, so you wanna make sure you avoid that. Cap this off so debris and moisture doesn't get in. Let's continue to the right rear. We're on the right rear wheel. This has drum brakes, so we have a wheel cylinder on the back here. If you have disc brakes and a caliper, it is still the same sequence, so still right rear after you do the front. Having said that, I'm gonna pop the bleeder screw cap off of the bleeder screw. This is an 8mm, by the way, no longer a 10 like in the front. I have my assistant in the vehicle pumping up the brake pedal. Go ahead. All right, they're holding pressure. I'm gonna put my hose on here, and with my 8mm wrench, I'm gonna crack this free. All right, pedal hit the floor, so I'm gonna close it up. Go ahead and pump again. Okay, pump again. I don't see air, but this fluid is extremely dirty, very dark in color, so I'm gonna keep going till I get some fresher fluid through. One last time, go again. That is much cleaner. You can let go of the brake pedal now. I'm going to remove my hose, the collection bucket, and I did spill some fluid here, so I'm going to wipe everything down with a rag and spray brake parts cleaner on this to clean everything off. Once you've done that, cap off the bleeder screw. And the last wheel is going to be the left rear. That's the driver's side rear wheel. Now after you're done bleeding the whole vehicle, remove the cap off the master cylinder and put more brake fluid in all the way up to the max line to make sure that's topped off. Put this cap back on. Make sure it's locked on tight. And at this point, if your pedal feels right, you're good to go. Bleed is done. The torque of the wheels is 79 foot-pounds, so make sure you torque all those to spec. If you are unhappy with how the brake pedal feels, repeat the same sequence until there's no air left in the system and the pedal feels nice and firm with the engine off. At that point, you would take it for a road test and confirm.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.